Speaking of the United States, there was a positive legislative development in this country, which is shocking because it just usually doesn't happen. But apparently, there's been a bill in the United States Senate to make daylight savings time permanent. Now, why is this a positive? And by the way, it passed unanimously in the Senate. So, why is this development inherently positive? So, one of the benefits of daylight savings time is that the sun sets later in all parts of the year. And so humans are not naturally supposed to be night owls, though, we have this thing called a circadian rhythm that uses the amount of light outside and uses the amount of light that we can see to regulate whether we're tired or sleepy, tired or not, right? And our circadian rhythm works in more than that way too, right? If you've ever felt tired, like after your lunch break or in the early afternoon, that's your body telling you, hey, like it's time you should grab a quick shut eye. But also, like, you'll notice, like, if you're sitting outside or whatever and the sun starts to set, you'll start to feel tired because the amount of light is changing. Our body is reacting to that. It's creating melatonin, which is the drug that helps us sleep, helps us fall asleep and stay asleep. And so, as our body makes these changes, as our body makes these changes, we get into cycles and patterns. And these circadian rhythms help us to stay healthy, right? So they tell us when to rest our brains, and when your brain is resting, I'm kind of into a tangent now, but when your brain is resting, it's able to clean itself, it's able to make new memories and build over old ones, and essentially your brain just kind of relaxes. It stops doing all the work that the brain does when it's awake, and it gives you an opportunity to feel refreshed so that in the morning you can have kind of a fresh look on things, right? So sleep and having consistent sleep is really important, and I'm sure you've heard your whole life that getting 8 hours of sleep is really important, and going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time is really important too. And the reason for these pieces of advice has to do with your circadian rhythm. Okay, so why am I talking about this? The reason I'm talking about this is because when twice a year we artificially move the clocks, we actually put our bodies out of step with their normal cycle. Now, of course, it must be said that during the course of a year, the sunset time changes each day, probably like a couple of minutes, or even just 1 minute each day. It either gets longer or shorter, right? We have the longest days and shortest days of the year based on what hemisphere you're in and what time of year it is and all that good stuff, right? But this very slow progression of sunrise and sunset changes allows for our body to transition and actually does not harm our circadian rhythms. However, when we artificially move the clocks an hour twice a year, what happens is our body is forced to react all at once, right? We lurch forward, we lurch back, and that throws off our circadian rhythms. And because there is more darkness, you see significant amount of mental health issues come up around those times. So especially when you are moving into an area, a time of the year where it's more dark, and I think that's the fall back. Yeah. So when we fall back, the sun sets a lot earlier. It's darker for a lot longer. And by the way, humans are a bit like houseplants. Like, we need food, water, and sunlight. And by the way, sunlight makes us feel good. It makes us feel happy. And when there's much less light in the day, as well as having our sleep schedules disturbed, oftentimes it's very difficult for people. And by the way, this is one of the reasons for seasonal depression, right? So if you've ever felt kind of depressed during the winter months, part of the reason to blame is the fact that the time is changing so significantly, and we're seeing a significant decrease during our waking hours of sunlight. So if we were to keep daylight savings time forever, we would essentially keep this longer amount of sunlight in our lives forever, and we wouldn't have to worry as much about dealing with, seasonal depression. We wouldn't have to deal with our circadian rhythms being messed up so significantly twice a year. And by the way, the reason that daylight savings time was created in the first place was in order to make sure that farmers had enough time in the day to do all of their planting and stuff, so they had more sunlight hours in a day to do the farming that they do. Now, mind you, this was before we had almanacs. This was before you could ask your smart device what time the sun was going to rise and set and things like that, right? Oftentimes farmers were getting up at the crack of dawn and working all day and going to bed at night, and by giving more daylight hours in the day, once we had kind of standardized times, right, it allowed for the labor for farm labor to occur during the daylight hours, which of course makes it much easier to do farming work to have daylight, right? So it made more sense to have like that the entire workday, as we understand it, was probably closer to 10 or 12 hours back then, to be honest with you. But the entire worked out day as we understood it would occur during the light hours, right? But this is not really an issue anymore. One, the workday is shorter. Two, we have technologies which allow for us to work in the dark, right? Not only do we have regular lamps, but you can light up a whole field, right? It's not difficult to illuminate a whole field if you had to do farming work in the dark. And a lot of the farming practices that were used at the time are just no longer used because we have more modern, more efficient processes to do farm work, right? So the reason that daylight savings time was created doesn't really exist anymore. So it's kind of about time. So there are lots of benefits, but also there's really, even if we didn't have the benefits, we should switch to daylight savings time permanently for the simple reason that there's no reason any longer to not have it, right? So when you have a solution in search of a problem, you get rid of the solution, right? So that's kind of where it's coming from. And so I'm very hopeful that this goes through. I don't really see why it wouldn't, honestly. There's no, I don't want to say there's no, because I don't know for sure. I can't see or think of any moneyed interest that wouldn't want this to happen. And since moneyed interests pretty much, drive everything in American politics, I'm trying to think of what situation a company would be in where they wouldn't want daylight savings time. I genuinely don't know. I feel like there's no industry. Yeah, I don't think there's any industry that is so much like that requires more night hours. I don't know. Do clubs have a big lobby? I don't really know. But even so, people don't go to clubs till late anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I genuinely don't know if there's any special interest that wouldn't want this. Hoping that it passes, because it would be really cool to have that. And plus, think about how much more time you could just spend doing stuff outside, right? You could spend more time grilling in the summer before it got dark would be nice. Other types of year, you could just kind of hang out outside for longer, which would be great. Winter, you'd have longer days, so you'd be less likely to be pressed. It'd be light out for longer, even if it was like a grayish light, right? Because it'd be cloudy or whatever. So just in general, I think it's a great thing. I really hope it happens. And, it doesn't affect the economy in any way, right? For the most part that I can think of. By the way, if you disagree with any of this, please let me know in the comments below. But, I think this is going to be universally a good thing. So let's hope that Congress doesn't fuck it up and that we can actually, go and enjoy all the extra outdoor time that we would get.
Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, throw a like on it, share with your friends, and subscribe for more of our content. You can also find all of our videos and clips on youtube.com. Just search Let Them Eat Bread and you'll find all of our content. Alright guys, see you next time. Bye for now.